New Zealand was one of the first countries to go on level 4 lockdown. And so I was actually stranded in the country for 60 days.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so that was like kind of a strange time, but it also gave me a lot of time to think about, what do I want to do next? What did I learn from that? And I came across this girl from Australia, Jackie Bell, who ran an ultra marathon on 7 continents, became the youngest to do it. And I wondered, has anybody done that for Ironman? And the youngest person to do 6 continents at the time was 32, and I was 23. So I didn't know, financially, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I don't know like how I would do it. But in that moment, I made a decision to plant the seed that this is what I'm going to do. And I don't care how long it takes, but this is how I'm going to figure out the puzzle. And that's what I did.
Welcome to episode 5 of Stories with Shomik. It's not every day one gets to speak to a sporting athletic icon. Today's guest is such a badass that to be eligible to talk to him, you need to have run at least one full marathon. In fact, the only acceptable way to listen to this episode is while you're moving. It could be while you're running, could be while you're at the gym, or maybe just out for a walk. But sitting and listening to this episode is not an option. Today, we're talking to Connor Emeny. Who is Connor? Connor is the youngest person in the world to complete an Ironman triathlon distance on 6 continents, and is now going for the record to be the only human on the planet to complete the Ironman on all 7 continents. Connor, honestly, just introducing you gives me chills. I got goosebumps. I've been reading up on you, and it's just been, let me just say, it's an honor, it's a privilege, and frankly, a bit of a fan moment to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks, Shomik. It's great to be here, and I appreciate the kind words. And if this gets more people moving while they're listening, that's great. So look forward to delving in and talking more today.
Awesome. So for the uninitiated, why don't you tell us what constitutes an Ironman triathlon?
For sure. So an Ironman is a long-form triathlon and is kind of widely regarded as the single hardest sporting event on the planet, single hardest day sporting event. And it comprises of a 3.86 kilometer swim, 180 kilometer bike ride, and then a 42.2 kilometer run. So, I mean, takes a while just to even say that, but it takes even longer to complete it. And I think the average completion time is about 13 hours, just over that. So
incredible.
It's a long time to be moving.
That's insane, but also superhuman. And tell us, what is the last continent left for you to conquer that you take on in January?
Yeah, so last year I finished the 6 continent challenge, in January I'm heading to Antarctica, so the coldest, driest, windiest continent on the planet, which will have many different elements and challenges of its own. And just to be clear, the other 6 were Ironman sanctioned races where it was competing against, thousands of people. This one isn't Ironman branded. This is just the distance of the same triathlon, and it'll just be me versus me. So a new challenge, but that's kind of the essence of this whole journey, is to push our limits and, see what we're capable of. And it's been a great journey, and really looking forward to it.
That's amazing. And how many days are we away from it coming?
Expected to depart in about 56 days. So coming up pretty soon, and just gearing up for it with lots of cold swims, testing some
Yeah.
gear, and staying mentally focused.
That's awesome. I have a question though. How do you train for Antarctica based out of Vancouver? How do you simulate those conditions?
Yeah, it's pretty challenging. My friends and I will hike into the Alpine, so into the
Hmm.
mountains, and find alpine lakes, which can get pretty cold, believe it or not. And then in the 2 months leading up to the race here, there's going to be lots of snowfall, so practicing biking on snow and ice, and seeing the most we can do with what we have. However, I recently just came back from Greenland 2 weeks ago, where I did something called the Polar Circle Marathon, which was a marathon on ice in
Hmm.
minus 15-degree temperatures. So I try to find challenges and simulations that will replicate the conditions that I'll face down there.
That's incredible. Minus 15. Okay, okay. So I run sort of long distances as a hobby. I actually ran my first marathon last year in Toronto, nowhere near the freezing conditions that you're going to be encountering, and I was pretty gassed by the end of it. How different is a city marathon, say a Toronto or a London or a New York, versus running on ice, and how different is the gear that you use to prep for it?
Yeah, well, first off, congrats.
Thank you.
Doing a marathon is no small feat. So well done. And um, yeah, so running in cold, is quite different. So you have to run in obviously like trail shoes, but additional spikes underneath your shoes. And even just the vibrations in your feet, after a while, is something that if you haven't trained on, your feet will get more tired more quickly.
Right.
um, and then breathing in cold air for that long is pretty tough. So there was a lot of elemental changes and layering, making sure that you're not overheating, or
Hmm.
once you sweat, are you able to keep your body temperature regulated? So there was a lot of challenges, and um, the terrain itself, running on ice and snow and rocks was quite challenging. So much more difficult than a city marathon,
I
and
bet.
you also don't really get the buzz or the energy of thousands of people around you. So
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned body heating. Like intuitively, you wouldn't think of overheating in minus 15 on ice, but once you're sort of running and you're into it, that is just how the body reacts. I wouldn't have even thought of that. Cool. So tell us about your first marathon, since that is where this story begins. Which was the first one that you ran? How did it go? How did it end? And the journey into, well, today, where you're one continent short of conquering the world.
yeah, so I mean, I grew up in Toronto, and in high school, played hockey mostly, but also tried out for the cross country team, and was never the fastest runner. Was running against guys like Justin Knight, who's now in the Olympics for 5K, and that's a whole story on its own. But I just loved like showing up and getting better, and that eventually progressed. I think it was like 2013, or in my grade 11 or 12 year, um, for a few friends and I to sign up for the Toronto Waterfront Marathon. And I just kind of like did no research. Was like, I'll see if we can do it. Why not try? And I went out as if I was running a 10K. I just was like, I'm just gonna go out and see how far I can go. I didn't bring any, water, gels, nutrition, anything like that. I was just like, let's just go for it and see what happens. Long story short, I I finished barely. I say barely because I virtually collapsed at the finish line. Um, and I had to go straight to the medic tents, and they sent me in a wheelchair to the perimeter. They could wheel somebody, and my dad met me in the car and picked me up. And my body was like in shock. And as scary as that sounds, the mentality I had was like, I couldn't believe I just did that. I shocked
Yeah.
myself of what I was capable of, and immediately felt like I wanted to do that again, but better and more
Hmm.
prepared. And yeah, that was my first experience. And I think it could have went two ways depending on how you looked at it, but looking at it in a positive lens led me to come back stronger, better, faster, all those things.
I love that. And the fact that you didn't really prep for a marathon and went in and finished is I don't like, for people who've not run long distance. I don't think they quite grasp what a big deal that is.
Mm.
Um, like, I trained for 6 months, and I thought I trained pretty well, but on the day I cramped at the 26th kilometer, and I was like, this is gonna be the longest day of my life.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like, honestly, very, very impressive. So tell me, so how did that switch from, okay, I just somehow finished a marathon, I'm still alive, I know I can do better, and I'm going to come back to it. So when did that transition happen from going from I want to do another marathon to I'm going to add a marathon and do two more things and keep pushing myself?
Yeah. So, after that, I kind of got the bug, I guess, in my mind of what else I was capable of, but was also, just finishing school, was thinking about what university to go to, and was playing high level hockey. So, um, I decided to go to Queen's University and not pursue hockey anymore. And because hockey was such a big part of my life, I was like, what am I going to do now? So a few friends and I tried out for a bunch of teams, intramural teams, like prep teams or varsity teams, clubs, the rowing club, the triathlon club. And long story short, I made the triathlon team. One of my friends that did the tryout, he couldn't swim, so he didn't pass the swim portion. The other one's bike tire popped. So somehow, like, the three of us went, and I did well enough to cross the line and do well enough to get offered a spot on the team. And
Love that.
it was my first experience with triathlon, and I was just like, wow, this was quite fun. Like, I wasn't like particularly great at any of the three, but I was solid at all three, and I saw that I could get better at each of them. Um, but they were all short races, 15-minute swim, 15-minute bike, 15-minute run. And not to drag the story on, but that's where I met this guy named Ben Rudson. We would compete head to head with. And then
Hmm.
he went off and did an Ironman and came 14th in the world for our age group in the world championships. And I
It's
was like,
amazing.
if he can do it, why can't I do it? And so I remember texting him in 2015 saying, by 2020, I'm going to do my first Ironman. And that's what I
Amazing.
did. Yeah.
Amazing. That is incredible. And that's also a testament to the fact that just being surrounded by people who are doing amazing things makes it so much more, you know if your friend can do it, why can't you? And uh, and whoever you surround yourself with will sort of determine, um, your trajectory with the things you try, the kind of work you do, the kind of hobbies you pursue. So that's pretty interesting to hear. Your first Ironman was in New Zealand, and you moved to New Zealand for it. Is that how it played out? Why New Zealand?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think where we kind of connected is our mutual work experience working with Uber. So I was
Hmm.
working with Uber in Canada on the Uber Eats team, and loved it. Honestly, it was an
Hmm.
incredible job. Loved the people, loved what I was doing, was learning a ton. However, in the back of my mind, I knew I had this itch to do this Ironman by 2020. And so I was trying to transfer to New Zealand to like work with Uber there, because I read up that New Zealand won the gold label for the best Ironman experience in the world. And I was
Cool.
like, if I'm going to do one, like at the time, I just wanted to do one, just one. But I was like, I want to do one that I'll remember forever. And New Zealand was high on my bucket list to visit. So when I saw it had the gold label, I knew instantly that's where I want to go.
It's amazing.
So in a weird way, I wasn't able to transfer within Uber directly, but when I left the job and moved and took a leap of faith, and I was like, I'm going to move there for 6 months, give myself 6 months to train properly for this race, and just go all in on this journey. And then when I got there, I rekindled with Uber there on their jump department, which I think is now known as Lime, but to help with the electric bikes and scooters, and ended up rejoining them in a funny way. But New Zealand was high on my list, gold label award. Would highly recommend anybody if they're ever able to have an opportunity to visit there. It's still to this day one of my favorite countries I've ever visited, and really, really special people and experience to go down there.
I love that. I love that. And you were working full time while also training for the Ironman, and you were doing it yourself. If I'm like, based on what I read, you were using YouTube to figure out how this is going to work. I want to know more about that, because I feel like everyone sort of starts off learning something on YouTube, but not like, it's typically more restricted to a hobby that you're working on online versus something that is so physical. So tell us more about how you managed your work, uh, focused on training, and absorbed everything from the internet.
Yeah, so with the nature of the job that I got when I was down there, it was essentially a startup, and my hours were from 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. every day. So I was waking up at 4 and getting to work for 5, because we were, in this essentially warehouse, building these scooters, getting them to certain city locations before people started work so they could get to work. So it was this really interesting challenge of, is this a viable solution for the city of Auckland? And then can we replicate that across other cities? So yeah, I was working from 5 to 1, would come home and then train. And what I did was I tried to find a local triathlon club, and I found one called Auckland City Triathlon Club. However, I was, working and living on a really tight budget. So I didn't want to pay for the club fee. So there's $5 drop-in sessions, and I did a handful of those, and then just memorized the workouts that they did and went and did them on my own. And then everything I couldn't, figure out on my own, I either tried to find a book or YouTube. So there's like lots of really great YouTube resources on swimming, and especially open water swimming. And to me, that was a whole new challenge. So I think the lesson in all of this is, just being a student of the craft and really trying to learn the fundamentals of anything before you jump in. But that doesn't mean you can't jump in and then learn the fundamentals as you're going. So yeah, that's kind of the approach that led me to my first race.
I love that. And do you work with a team now, or are you still using good old YouTube?
Yeah, so I'm lucky to have a really, really incredible mentor, and I've gotten a lot better, a lot smarter, a lot more efficient over the last 6 races. However, yeah, I connected with a guy named John Ragg, who is a absolute legend in the triathlon world. He's 73 years old, I believe, and he's done 276 Ironmans, the most in the world.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Yeah, and the crazy story about that is he didn't do his first one until he was 38 years old. So,
Oh, wow.
long story short, I connected with him. We've been going for some bike rides in Toronto when I'm back in Toronto. And then he comes out to Vancouver quite a bit to see his partner here. And he's been a great mentor, and he's given me a lot of good wisdom, training, books on, what to specialize or read up on. And just tried to learn from the best, and lucky to connect with him.
That is amazing. Holy shit. Yeah, just like I at this point, I'm still absorbing the number because that is incredible. Wow. No, that is
Yeah.
amazing. Um, if you had to give advice to someone who's just about starting out on this path, and I'm just being, and I asked this selfishly for myself because I signed up for my first Olympic distance triathlon for July of 2024. I have run for the last few years, so I understand that space a little bit. Have not like I've frolicked in the swimming pool, but I haven't properly done laps in years. I haven't biked since I was 15.
Yeah.
What would be a a piece of advice that you would have for people just starting out and at some point aspire to do this?
Yeah. Well, I think you did the first step, which is sign up. I think a lot of people think the other way. They think I need to be ready and then sign up. But the truth is, you're never going to be fully ready. So I think, that would be my first piece of advice. Anyone considering either a run, 5K, marathon, ultra marathon, triathlon, Ironman, is like sign up and give yourself that window of time so you can work backwards and create a proper plan. Number two is keep showing up. I know, it might be hard at first, but with time and repetition, you will get better. For triathlon specifically, I think, there's a lot of great resources. One book I would recommend anybody starting out buy is called the Triathlon Training Bible by Joel Friel. I think it's like $20 or $30 on Amazon or a bookstore, and it's just it's a great resource for nutrition, for tapering, for terminology of what goes into a triathlon. So yeah, and then the last piece would be try and gamify it if you can, or find a friend that you can do it with, because I think, in retrospect, in my journey, it can be a lot of isolation and time to yourself, and, big training days. So if you can find somebody that is able to share that with you, you'll be more likely to put in better effort, keep showing up. And it also makes it way more memorable and rewarding when you get to do a race with your friend or somebody new.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, that's awesome. And thank you for the book recommendation. I'm gonna go onto Amazon right after this call and
Okay.
order my copy and start
Yeah.
reading up on it. No, that is super interesting. Tell me about. Well, the first one is always very special. But tell me about number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like,
Yeah. So, New Zealand was definitely special. My goal was to try and go under 12 hours, and I got 12 hours and 9 minutes. So, although I was happy, as you can imagine, pretty goal oriented person. So, it's kind of in the back of my head, and I was just like, man, I think I could do better. Similar to the
yeah,
marathon. And so, for context of how the 6 came to my mind, was when I was in New Zealand, and I did my race. It was March 7th, 2020. And 10 days later, the pandemic hit. And New
oh, just
Zealand was
before
one
the
of the,
pandemic.
yeah, it was the last race before
Yeah.
the pandemic. But New Zealand was one of the first countries to go on level 4 lockdown. And so I was actually stranded in the country for 60 days.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so that was like kind of a strange time, but it also gave me a lot of time to think about, what do I want to do next? What did I learn from that? And I came across this girl from Australia, Jackie Bell, who ran an ultra marathon on 7 continents, became the youngest to do it. And I wondered, has anybody done that for Ironman? and the youngest person to do 6 continents at the time was 32, and I was 23. So I didn't know, financially, physically, mentally,
Mhm.
emotionally, spiritually, I don't know like how I would do it, but in that moment I made a decision to plant the seed that this is what I'm going to do, and I don't care how long it takes, but this is how I'm going to figure out the puzzle. And that's what I did. But pandemic really threw a lot of curveballs, and my next race, didn't happen for over a year later. But when the world did open up, I did 3 races in 3 months. So I did Chattanooga, Tennessee, and then 2 weeks later, I did Mallorca, Spain, and then 3 weeks later, I did South Africa. So doing
Wow.
3 in 3 months was a lot on the body,
I
and
bet. And I'm
yeah,
assuming these were pretty different weather conditions that you tested yourself in.
yeah. So I mean, Chattanooga was great because I was really excited. I knew I was going to race. But a lot of these like kind of changed last minute. I was actually scheduled for Ironman Canada, but the with regulations they decided to cancel it, and I got a transfer to Chattanooga. It just happened to be on the same day, so it was good for fitness
Sure.
wise. Um, but
So when you
yeah,
say regulation, you mean you're referring to like the pandemic era regulations. Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, lots of weather conditions changing. Um, it wasn't until those 3 were hard just from the time, logistics, and my body not recovering fully, but was able to finish those. And then the 5th one was in the Philippines, and that was probably the hardest one, just with the heat. So it was like
Right.
40 degrees. I lost 10 pounds during the race, and sounds like a theme here, but ended up in the medic tent, just due to like pushing myself a bit too hard. But um, yeah, it was also one of the most special races, and I say that because so many things went wrong. When I arrived, my bike didn't arrive, and I had 72 hours to find a bike. Managed to connect with some local people at a bike shop who found me a bike. And then
Wow.
the yeah, so the story went, I arrived, I didn't have my bike. I went to a Starbucks, picked up their phone, called all the local bike shops in the area to see if anybody had a bike. I'm 6'2", almost 6'3", and the average height in the Philippines is about 5 feet, so they don't have bikes in my size usually. But I went to this bike shop, and the guy was like, oh, my buddy played for the national Philippines triathlon team, or basketball team. He has a bike. I can call and see if you can use it. He calls him, brings the bike in. They stay after hours to fit the bike to me, give me a helmet,
Wow.
give me shoes. Just the hospitality and like willingness to help somebody is going to stay with me forever. And it's something that I try and do wherever I can, is support other people as well. And
That's
um,
incredible.
yeah, I got to meet the whole national Philippines triathlon team, and they took me in and really like made it a special experience. So it was my worst performing race, but probably the most impactful on me as a person, and witnessing just like community and support, and
Yeah.
everybody wants to see everybody, win. And I really love that.
I love that. That is such a beautiful, beautiful thing to bring up. Like I generally uh, I read this recently and I've been trying to follow through on it. Is always assume positive intent when you're talking to someone who you've never met before or don't know.
Yeah.
And like I think I'm largely pretty optimistic and tend to assume the best for people. But since I consciously started doing that, suddenly I find like, oh yeah, people are a lot more nicer than what the internet would lead us to believe. So I'm like, this story is awesome. I'm going to be talking about this with everybody I meet, that the at the end of the day, people are people.
Yeah.
And sure, there's a lot of, and not to minimize all the bad things going on in the world. But most people just, want to do their thing. They want to help each other out. And largely the world wants to see everybody win. And I'm so glad that you had an experience like that. Would at this point would it be safe to assume that if you don't make it to the medic tent by the end of it, it's not a good enough race for you?
um, yeah, you know what? I think that's just a default mechanism for me is just try and leave everything out there, which might not always be the healthiest, but I guess you could say that.
It's good to know. So okay, during the lockdown, while you obviously couldn't, like, the entire world was sort of shut down and these races weren't happening, how did you keep yourself in that mindset, and how did you continue to keep training, or did you just decide once things open up, I'm going to give it my all?
Yeah, so I think any big goal, you have to break it down into smaller goals. So I set up all these challenges for myself and other people because I figured if I can help other people stay motivated, that'll in turn motivate me to keep going as well. So I founded this community run challenge called Project 24, which, because races were canceled and everybody was kind of like, what can I do? I wanted to bring people together through the community of running. And it was a 24-hour challenge. And the idea was you could either do it solo or in teams virtually and try and run the whole 24 hours, run, walk, break it up in teams. And we had an incredible amount of people turn out, raised, thousands of dollars for charity. And the idea was everybody paid $24 to participate. There was tons of prizes from different sponsors, and all the money went to charity for the winning team that collected the most amount of kilometers in the 24 hours.
Amazing.
So, seeing that was great. Then I went and did my own challenges. So one of them was called the Calendar Club, where I ran the day of the month in kilometers. So
Wow.
May 10th, 10 kilometers, May 11th, 11 kilometers. Eventually you're doing 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, adds up to about 500 kilometers in the month. Went to the Rocky Mountains and did a 48-hour run through the Rocky Mountains. So just try to create my own unique challenges that I could stay motivated, push myself, kind of just test myself in different unique ways. And I think sometimes that's just a really good approach to have things in your calendar that you're working towards. And just had to adopt that mindset of always be ready. If the world's going to open up next week or in 1 year, that shouldn't change me showing up every day to be ready for when that happens.
I love that. And this is actually an excellent segue into fundraising. Tell me more about the organization you're currently fundraising for.
Yeah, so as you can see, I have a bit of a mustache going. Got the pin here for Movember as well. Yeah, so I've been part of Movember for 7 years now, but I'm a big, advocate for men's health. And I think, this November is a great time to recognize that men's health is just as important as everybody's health. And, sometimes it's hard for men to open up and talk about what's going on in their life, the struggles that they face. And, friends and family of mine have been impacted by that, as well as, testicular prostate cancer. And to me, my role is to be just an advocate. So I've joined, a team called Team Cinnamon and Oak, where we run a lot of events throughout the month of November to try and raise a lot of money and awareness for the cause. And last year we raised $80,000. This year we're trying to raise $100,000. I think we're about 25,000 right now. So still a bit of work to do the rest of this month, but we have some good events lined up and partner with good companies and charities and race organizations to, make some noise. But the root of it
That's
all is
amazing.
really to check in on somebody near you and just ask them how they're doing and spark a conversation. Yeah,
I
so
love
that's
that.
kind of the
And if someone were to want to contribute to the fundraiser, is there a website that they can go to?
Yeah, so I mean, my Antarctica project is also linked to the Movember page, and we're raising some money through that challenge. And people can find out more about me and my donation link at chasingantarctica.com, where they can support or follow on Instagram, and it's in my bio there at Connor Emeny, direct link as well there.
Amazing. And for those listening, I highly recommend checking out the website. Of course, donate what you can if you can. But also the video which describes the Chasing Antarctica project. I watched it, I got goosebumps. It is incredible. Obviously, no one has done this before, what you're attempting to do. And I'm so glad that you're documenting this entire journey, because this is something the world as a whole should know. It is inspiring. It is a testament to the human spirit, and hopefully it'll make people not necessarily want to go do a triathlon in the Antarctic, but just move a little bit more and push themselves beyond their comfort zone. So chasingantarctica.com, please go check it out. I'll also add it in the show notes, so that people can find it. But that is amazing. That is amazing, and I hope you get to the 100K goal. I hope you exceed the 100K goal,
Thank you.
for the fundraiser. Cool. I have two more questions, because this is something I'm always curious about. Is, like, obviously triathlons are not cheap. It involves travel, it involves registration, it involves a ton of equipment, it involves a ton of training. And I know you've gone about securing sponsors. How did you decide that sponsorships is the path for you? And then how did you go about pitching it to relevant brands?
Yeah, I think the other thing it requires is sacrifice. So, for me, over the last 3 years, I've also been working full time. So working full time to fund this goal. And not a lot of people know, but I lived in 10 places in 18 months while doing it. So friends' couches, my parents' place, just Airbnbs, everything I could just to, put my effort and money into this project. And with that, started sharing a little bit of the journey. I think sometimes that's scary, is to open up and share what you want to achieve. But I really believe that, people want to help you and see you succeed. And if you don't share, nobody knows how they can help you or what you want. So yeah, I just started reaching out to a few companies saying, this is what I'm working on. Would really love your support. And it's been super challenging, as anybody in partnerships or sales knows, is there's a lot of competing priorities. And I think
Right.
that the number one thing for me was just staying authentic to who I am as a person and finding brands that align with me and creating shared value. And yeah, that's been helpful in terms of finding gear partners, supplements or nutrition, and really, really great to connect with some people that believe in you and help offset some of the costs.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, sacrifices. Yeah, that is something. I'm glad you brought that up. I should have added it in the questions, but yeah, it's such a huge part of it. Saying yes to this means saying no to 20 other things, and
Yeah.
the the why behind the picking this over the other 20 things has to be so strong that you're able to make that decision and say yes to this every day is very, very impressive. That's awesome. Connor, this has obviously been a journey, and something that we missed while we were discussing the record for the youngest person to complete this on 6 continents. At at that time, the record was 32. How old were you when you broke it?
26. Yeah.
There you go. By a full 6 years. That is incredible. Congratulations on that. And how old are
Thank
you
you.
now?
27.
27. And at 27, you will be the first person to do it on all 7 continents. That is, I'm getting goosebumps again just seeing. It's definitely a story that like obviously we only started talking a couple of days ago, but the story is so inspiring. The why behind why you're doing this is just so it's like the people I try to bring to the show are people who are leaving a legacy beyond just their day to day, and this is as big as it gets. So I just get goosebumps every time I bring up the fact that you're going to be the first person to do this on all 7 continents.
I do want to say there is a lot of maybe attention on me, and in a triathlon it's very individual, but I really think that it's a team effort. Honestly, like I couldn't do it without the team, the people that really helped me, the brands, the people that believed in me. And I think the biggest thing to do for somebody is to believe in them. They may not need helping support or sponsor or encourage is great, but really just going to somebody and say, I believe in you, and keep going can be the light, the matchstick that just lights a fuse under them to really try. And I think it's the same with, Movember is like, I believe in you as like a human being, and I'm here for you and I encourage you is just like the message that I think more people need to hear of. And that's something that will make the world a better place.
I love that. That is very, very beautifully said. And truly, it does take a village to get anything over the line, but especially something of this scale. So January 2024, you're going to break you're going to hold a record no one else has ever had. What's next for Connor once that is done?
That's the infamous question, isn't it?
And if the answer is I'm just going to stay on the couch and not move for a few weeks, I think that is a very reasonable and completely fair decision to make.
Yeah, I think right now I'm pretty focused on just this challenge, but I really hope that it's a launch pad for many more exciting challenges ahead. And there's some big ones that I would love to do one day, like row across the Atlantic Ocean. There's a big race around that I'm really excited about doing. And I think the biggest one though for me is to document this and either create a book, even if it's just for myself to look back on and relive and really process all the stories and the lessons and the growth I've had as a person. I want to take some time to sit down, and I'm trying to do that now, is just really reflect and synthesize everything into something that I can look back on and share with other people. But yeah,
that's amazing.
Many ideas ahead, and don't want to get too caught up in them, one step at a time.
Fair. Well, whenever you decide to hit publish on the book, rest assured I will be lined up for the pre-release to make sure I can get my hands on a copy as soon as I can. That is amazing. Connor, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show. obviously you have a lot of training going on. I believe you train 3 to 4 hours a day leading up to this.
Yeah, it's getting quite intensive, and I'm gonna head out right after this call for a good run.
And how long have you been training to be on this podcast?
Training on this podcast, I couldn't stop thinking about it since 3 days ago when we first connected.
Well, I tend to have that effect on people. What can I say? No. Well, that is awesome. I usually like to end with one question, but in this case, it's going to be two.
Sure.
Question one: what do you have to say to someone who's listening to this podcast? Like, if you could summarize one line and tell them, have some advice to give them, what would it be?
I think do hard things. Whatever that means to you. It doesn't have to be physical. It can be something that's outside of your comfort zone you haven't done in a while. Reaching out to somebody new for the first time, talking to a stranger on the street, just do hard things, because that's where growth is. That's what I would say.
Awesome. And the final question, which is probably the most important question you've ever been asked in your entire journey, is if you were a wrestler on WWE, what would be your entry song?
Oh man.
We only ask the hard-hitting questions here.
Yeah. That's a big one. You know what? I think either something from J. Cole, or I have to go back to my roots and say "Living on a Prayer" from Bon Jovi.
Nice.
It's what I used to listen to on the old cassette tapes when I was like 6 years old or something. So I'd bring that back for yeah.
Amazing. I love that. That's awesome. Well, on that note, good luck. We're all cheering for you. You got this. To quote a very wise man who mentioned it a few sentences ago, I believe in you. And we all believe in you. And we're all super, super excited to follow along on your journey and cheer you at the finish line. Well, I'll be warm and cozy in my apartment when you're done, but I will be cheering you on from my living room. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and thank you, Connor.
Thank you, Shomik. Really appreciate the time, and excited to see all the future success with your podcast, and wish you the best of luck with it.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Take care.